Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. How are you? My name is Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace, and I am your host. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, register with StreamYard so I can see your name. Otherwise, you're going to be anonymous. It's fine if you want to, but you'll just be anonymous. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Amanda, Kirsten, Michelle, and Ruth, you ladies rock and keep everything going. All of you support me, and I want to make sure that I say thank you to all of you. That we are on our 22nd show, which I just think is absolutely amazing. If you enjoy the show, though, and would like to support it for just the cost the cup of a cup of coffee, you know what I mean, you can support it. So go to sherrypalace.com and use the support tab. And like I said, little as $3 a month, you can be supporting the show. And I appreciate your generosity. Thank you in advance. Okay, enough with the housekeeping. Tonight's show is on the goddess. Let me introduce you to God's wife. She crossed my path when I was doing research on ancient religions for my dissertation. Previous to my studies, I had no idea a goddess existed across the ancient landscape. Raised as an evangelical Christian, any questions about the absence of a feminine deity were dismissed or silenced. Growing up, I heard of feminine gods in the pagan religions, but my God was all male. God and Jesus, two guys in the sky. The Holy Spirit was often labeled as feminine, but she's a spirit, not a form of God, not our image. And since Protestants don't give Jesus's mother Mary any divinity, my faith only included men in the position of power. So I was shocked to discover a deity in my form, attached to my God, who was powerful, revered, honored across the entire ancient landscape. So let me introduce you to our panel and hear what they know about her and what they have to say. First, we have, there we go. Always fun with the tech, right? First, we have Daphne Paris. She leads people by igniting the flame within. Igniting the fire within. She found deep healing in facilitating workshops and working with individuals where she holds space and guides people through deep into the wisdom of their bodies, where the real healing and transformation happens. Daphne is enthusiastic about empowering others and lives by example. She is an active Vita coach for love, intimacy, and relationships, a level 2 warrior goddess facilitator, and a Sundar Sakahan master firewalker trainer. Hello, Daphne. Thank you for being here.
You rocked that. Thank you for having me.
I can't read tonight very well. Okay, next we have a guest that is a friend, and she's a regular at this point. Reverend Michelle Saveco, PhD, is retired, but continues to serve by sharing reflections, music, meditations, spiritual counseling, and more with open-hearted, open-minded, inclusive individuals, groups, churches, and centers. She also facilitates rhythm drum circles. Reverend Shell focuses on New Thought teachings and practices universal principles, celebrating everyone as individualized expressions of the One, honoring all loving paths and people. She identifies as New Thought, which is practical and positive, Christian, coming from a very diverse background, but is pluralistic in her approach to spirituality. Welcome, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So let's talk about God's wife. Oh, Tim's here. Christine's here. Hello, everyone. We already got a wow. So you first, Daphne, you actually work with the goddess per se. So tell me what you know about her.
Yeah, so Sherry, it's interesting that you talk about not experiencing the goddess while you were growing up. For me, it was the opposite. I was
Oh,
raised
wow.
deep within the Greek culture. My
Okay.
father was born and raised in Greece, and I spend a month there every year. And there's goddesses everywhere. There's like 22 Greek goddesses, but I always saw them as a really outside power, an outside source. And it wasn't until about 5.5 years ago that I realized like the goddess within us, right? And how do we like bring her in as like a powerful, supportive energy in our own lives? And that's when I really started playing with the goddess energy. And, as you mentioned, I'm a warrior goddess facilitator. And this idea of the warrior and the goddess, a lot of people think of it as a masculine and feminine, and it's not. They're actually just two really different energies that we all hold within us, and some of us lean more towards warrior side, some more towards the goddess side, and you get to play with both of those. And I started really like harnessing that power of when can I bring in the goddess more, like how can that serve me in my life, and all that she is. And she's become my favorite. Like she's so, to me, so powerful and gentle and soft. And I love that even in our culture now, like I think Wonder Woman, this island of goddesses, like
Yeah.
she's more prevalent in our culture today than she has been in a very long time.
Well, and the patriarchy killed her. So, as soon as they silenced her, all of that divine energy went away and became bad, like we see across the Judeo-Christian religions.
Yes.
Michelle, what's your experience with the goddess?
Well, first, I don't think she was really killed.
No, that's a bad word. I apologize for that. Yes.
I think they did their best to kill her off, but I think she stayed alive and well and just showed up in a variety of different forms, depending on what the cultures were. And, but for me, like growing up in my part Catholic, part Jewish, dabble in Buddhism, Theosophy, Hinduism, kind of whatever came up for you. I grew up with a huge hand-carved wooden statue of Kuan Yin representing, but we never thought of it as the goddess. We
Say
thought
that
of
name
him
again.
as Kuan Yin.
Kuan Yin. And is that Jewish?
No, that is Asian or Buddhist, not sure which. And but she represents fertility, among other things. And we didn't talk or think in terms of goddess, but divine feminine. So for in the part of the family that was Catholic, that showed up in Mary.
Yes.
And also Mary Magdalene, even though she was supposed to be a bad girl.
She wasn't.
We had statues, and I shared a room with my grandmother, and she had statues of Saint Anne and Saint Elizabeth, who she was named after. And they were treated as intercessor. I can never pronounce that.
Intercessors.
But where you would pray to them because you couldn't go directly to the source, kind of thing.
Which is a whole nother topic in and of itself that I could completely go down.
But the idea of goddess, that was something that was just kind of, even back then, thought of as new age and kind of woo-woo and out there, and not necessarily the same thing as divine feminine. But then as I grew and, studied, was exposed to more, specifically when I got very interested in Joseph Campbell's work in the latter 80s, and ended up meeting somebody in Pittsburgh when we lived there that had gone to Sarah Lawrence College, where he was a professor. And they had a series of 20 videos that he had made on lectures that he did at Sarah Lawrence that talked about goddess / divine feminine in a variety of cultures through the ages. And that just, between that and the power of myth, those just really piqued my interest in it. But I think it's something that, like, I guess I've always either had the need or realized that there had to be balance. And so it couldn't be all just masculine, that there had to be that balance of feminine. So, like when Daphne mentioned the energy, it was like, yes, it's not you're either this or you're either that. It's not black and white. It's a blending of the energy. And that sometimes you have part of one energy that's kind of dominant. And then other times, depending on what's going on with you and what's going on outside of you, then you have the other part that's being dominant.
Well, and it's definitely honoring both. When you do honor the goddess, it's as opposed to being submissive. The women are supposed to be submissive, and we're supposed to be honoring them. When we bring the goddess in, it does honor all of that femininity. When I learned about Esther, who is in the Judeo-Christian Bible, throughout the Bible, I started asking my friends, did you know God had a wife? And everybody was like, what are you talking about? It was like, for 3,000 years, God had a wife. She's strewn throughout the Old Testament. Pillars to her stood at Solomon's temple for 3/4 of the time that it stood. Mm-hmm. She's throughout Jeremiah. She's in Ezekiel, Isaiah, Deuteronomy. And to find that, they turned it. I mean, even Paul mentions her. So to have studied the Bible, to have been blinded to that, and then to discover her was like, wow. My last name is Palace. So supposedly, I am a descendant from the goddess Athena. Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. So, some people go, that fits. But, again, it's mythology. I was told, mythology isn't the real stuff. That's the fairy tales. The Bible's real. But it's like, okay, but I've got the last name. So that, goes in. As a child, I didn't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And then when I found her and saw her, it did give me that power. It gave me the power to stand on my own, because all I had ever heard was submission. As a woman, submission.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me about that is being raised in a part Jewish family, going to Hebrew school for 5 years. We were surrounded by Jewish friends. And to read now that, basically in order to eliminate the goddess or the divine feminine, men had to do everything that they could to try to kill her off. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the women that I grew up with, who were my role models and our neighbors and friends' mothers and stuff, I thought, can you imagine trying to convince those women that they were supposed to be submissive or subservient to anybody? That just does, that doesn't
my life
for me. But then I remembered there are still branches on the Judaism tree where, in spite of everything, men walk in one door, women walk in another. Women sit in one place, men sit in another. So there's still that, separation that's going on. The other thing that occurred to me, well, one of many things, was that in Genesis, we read about how God turns to a companion, but we're never told who the companion is, and says, let's make man after our own image. And it's always, in my experience, been accepted that God was the man talking to his wife. But when I was putting together a presentation around 10 years ago or so, it occurred to me, what if God was the woman and she was talking to her husband?
I like that.
And I thought, doesn't that give you something to think about? And it wasn't like totally out of the blue, because I had started reading what, like God's name was El. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things was El Shaddai, God of the mountains. Mm-hmm. Well, Shaddai is thought to come from a Hebrew root word that means breast. And so when you think about breasts as mountains, and I would kind of look down at myself and say, yeah, I can picture that. But it gave you like a whole other meaning for what the words in. So in exploring these different things in L, I mean, even my name ends in L, as you know, as Michael does, and
Israel.
Rachel, Israel, um, Raphael, just those are all things that are spin off of God. So what's really interesting is to take the different Hebrew names and stuff and look them up in something like a metaphysical Bible dictionary and see what the actual Hebrew meaning is for them. And it can give you so many more insights to who does this person represent? Because to me, these are not just characters, even though I know there's a lot of mythology that's woven into all the rest of the history, the culture, and everything that comes up there. But it's also like our story in our evolving, in our understanding. And if we know what these names mean, it gives us a better idea of what the story is about and what it means to us.
Well, especially when we went biblically from Elohim to Yahweh, we went to the and the El.
Mm-hmm.
The names literally changed because of this, and all of that change is patriarchal, because then all of a sudden, again, you take out the divine feminine, and she's gone. And according to the Bible, she was known as Asherah, but she was also known as Esther, Ashtoreth, and Ishtar. All of the ancient religions have a goddess, except for the Judeo-Christian.
And it really depends on if you're looking at the Israelite history, the Canaanites, the Babylonian, whose history, and the name just kind of changes a little bit.
Allah, God. Same type of thing, different dialects.
Yeah. And I had like this, when I was first reading about her and the tree of life and her being a symbol of the tree, or the tree symbolizing her. And I thought, for a long time now, we've said the Christmas tree really is a pagan thing. And I think it's a pretty common these days understanding. But the origin of that was Asherah, and pagans that worshipped her or adored her, doing the Christmas tree thing, except it wasn't, of course, called the Christmas tree. They were just using that as their object of affection or whatever.
I did a story a couple years ago called It's Christmas Time. It's on my blog at sherrypalace.com, and you can find it there, that details the wreath was actually a symbol of the vagina, the tree, the Christmas decorations, all of those feed into the goddess. She was called Wisdom. She was called the Queen of Heaven, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So I want to know from the other side. Daphne, you are the other side. You don't have the Judeo-Christian, so you have this other vision of the goddess. How are you? What do you take to fill yourself with her energy? How does she affect you? I mean, you said that she makes you stronger, but how do you pull that? What do you pull? Do you just say the goddess?
So it really depends on where I'm at and what I need. But I'm a big believer in intuitive energy and calling in what you need. Right now, like on my nightstand at home, I have the statue of the goddess Artemis. She came to me in a shamanic drum journey that I was partaking in, and she's the protector of children. And at that time, my children were needing a lot of protection. So it made a lot of sense to me. So I was going through like a prayer with her about helping my children, help protect my children. But it's really inviting that energy in and getting comfortable with it. So I used to not be comfortable with kind of anything classified as the feminine. However, it was ingrained into me. I almost saw that and felt that as a weakness.
Yeah.
And going through that shift to changing that perspective to like, no, that soft feminine energy is like a superpower. Like I always say now, like my superpower is my vulnerability. So it's the ability to go like really deep and really open, right? And to me, that's like that goddess energy, like no fear, right? You can cry in front of people, you can laugh in front of people. And the more I taught with women too, I learned that the more vulnerable I became, the more it would open them up for that same space. And like, to me, that's the goddess energy. So it's not always just calling in one goddess, right? Like one goddess, Artemis, but it's like, no, I want that goddess energy. And they symbolize different things. I mean, Artemis is a badass. She's got a bow and arrow, right? And she never was with a man. So she's not like some soft feminine, what I imagine of this long-haired, beautiful goddess. No, she's like a hardcore badass protector, and she's a goddess. There's an image I have of this tribeswoman holding a machete and breastfeeding her baby. And like, to me, that's like,
wow, that's
ultimate
awesome.
goddess, right? Like I have that image saved because it's like, yeah, she's maternal and nurturing, and she's like ready to defend her people at any cost. So I think for me, my journey with the goddess has been just inviting in all this different possibility of what she can be and playing with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think for those of us that experience God, it's kind of the same thing. Rather than just assigning certain attributes, because again, with the goddess, there can be the tendency to create her in our image. The things that we feel like make us nurturing, maternal and stuff, we, give her those same qualities and stuff, when in fact, you can't put her in a box either. It's no matter what you come up with as a definition, she's that and more.
Well, one of the things that I liked about her was her big hips and big boobs. It wasn't this Barbie doll. In fact, I want to share some images. Not that one. That one. Look at these depictions of her in ancient art.
Mm-hmm.
There with the belly, pregnant, beauty, and none of this, modern, everyday skin and bones and here to please a man. And I absolutely love that. It was her power, her honor, and taking that femininity and honoring it, as opposed to my hips are too big, my ass is too fat, all of this. It was, this is beauty, this is honor. I just love that.
Well, to me, she commands that. It doesn't matter. Like she owns everything that she is and is unapologetic about it. Like she's just a presence that's there.
Exactly. I mean, and owning that again, because I was raised to be submissive and, second class citizen and, all of this. So to embrace her power and her love for who she was and everything about it. I mean, if we didn't have the wide hips, we couldn't have children. If we didn't have the breasts, we wouldn't be able to feed them. Everything that's been sexualized about femininity, she crushes and owns it and says, this is how I give life. This is how we all get here. And that's where I get my fierceness from her. Athena, I get, okay, I'll take you down. But Ashira is embracing my femininity.
Well, and as you talk about Athena too, I mean, I've been to so many of the temples in Greece, and it's fascinating to me that the goddesses were so revered in Greece and how much it's shifted. The Greek Orthodox marriage ceremony is all being submissive to the man and taking care of the man.
Really?
Yeah. And Sparta, my family's from Sparta, the Spartans, they were one of the greatest civilizations. they were the only women allowed to own property in Greece.
Oh, wow.
The whole country, like at the height of the Spartan army, the only women that were allowed. And you go now and it's totally patriarchal. I mean, literally the goddess temples are ruins. They're preserved and you can visit them, but she's not alive in that country at all. And
they've literally been defaced.
Tragedy. Yeah, just such a tragedy.
I want to go. I want to walk all of those stairs soon enough, as soon as we can travel again. Michelle, how do you embody her? What do you do to feel her and use her and the divine feminine and all that she brings?
Probably just through my nurturing. I just have a need to nurture kind of everything and everyone, whether, and I guess I could say nature, nurture nature, and which we're all a part of. But whether it's trees, plants, animals, humans, whatever, there's just that need to nurture. But part of that nurturing is protecting. And it's like, don't say or do anything about anybody that I care about, which is pretty much everybody. And kind of especially the underdogs in that, because then the fierceness rises up to wanting to protect, and not in an aggressive way, but in, like I said, a protective way.
Daphne, I think you're frozen. We might have lost her. She's actually in Mexico right now. She gets the long distance award. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Okay, I heard you guys. I didn't miss a beat here.
Okay, good. One of the things that I found, and again, I have not studied mythology or any of that, but just the thought of wisdom and war with Athena, to have that dichotomy between it, to have the nurture and the warrior, very rarely, you don't see that in men. Because again, it's viewed as weakness. The nurture is feminine. Don't be like a woman. That's the main thing the Bible says. Don't be like a woman, whatever you do. So in taking that off, to be able to nurture and be a badass, we have something that they can't embody, or that they don't embody, sadly enough. I mean, when I did the Divine Feminine show a couple weeks ago, that we talked about how men especially were damaged by the lack of a divine feminine. So,
but at the same time, look at what they did to all of the women that show up in the Bible, just about. It's like, anybody that I personally admire, they tried to make out to be a Jezebel, a bad woman. Yeah.
Liar, a whore.
Starting with Eve, rather than looking at her qualities of being inquisitive. To me, like I love her inquisitiveness and not wanting to be obedient, to being independent and making decisions. And all of the things that I admired about Eve were things that they're holding against her in the story. And that happens so much in whether it's Ruth or Esther, all of them, they're just made out to be bad.
Well, the story of Adam and Eve take on a special meaning when you understand that Asherah was represented and symbolized by the tree of life. She was associated with snakes. Ancient man would have understood the symbolism and would have recognized it woven into the Adam and Eve story. The tree of knowledge.
Yes, snakes represent healing. That's why
regenerative, fertility, sexuality.
In the medical profession, use snakes and their logo and stuff because it represents healing. And so snakes, that's a good thing.
Not anymore.
People don't look beyond the, what's actually written and taking it literally and stuff and looking to the symbolism.
To me, it's like the wounded masculine that can't recognize the power of the women, right? They've been wounded by the same we work together, right? So when the patriarchy started squashing the goddess and the feminine, the whole construct started falling in on itself, because it's not how it's meant to be. It's like we're each supposed to have these strengths and powers and work together to complement. So I feel like as the patriarchy destroyed the feminine and the goddess, it actually made itself crumble as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's lost its validity, right?
Well,
And its power.
It lost that, and it also lost the ability to express feelings.
Mm-hmm.
With the position that they took, then all of a sudden, if they were caring, if they, showed hurt or pain, compassion, any of those things, they weren't being masculine. So they had to suppress all those things. Yeah. So it's done them harm psychologically on a lot of levels over these, thousands of years.
Well, making women weak in general has done harm, because when you say don't be like a woman, then there's all these connotations put on top of it of weakness and emotional and all of these. I can say the women I know are far stronger than most of the men I know. As a general rule, I don't know everybody, but the women, let's just use childbirth as an example.
That's where I was going to go.
Yeah, a man with a cold, a woman with childbirth. Let's measure these two and see the reactions from them. We are strong. In fact, to get a little blue here, I had a goal to change the definition of balls and vagina or pussy, because you flick a ball, a testicle, and a man crumbles. And yet the vagina is stretched and tears and all of these things, as Betty White said, take a pounding, and it snaps back. So, when everyone says, oh, you're a pussy, I said, thank you. That means I'm strong. You just don't know what you're talking about. You tell me you have balls, that means you're weak. There's no strength there.
I'm going to use that.
I hate it. And being in Florida, they're hanging on the trucks, and it's like, oh my God, come on, So just changing the definitions and changing what we think of as weak. I try really hard not to use bitch in a negative term now. Now it's all positive. I will say bitch on a regular basis, and it's in a good way. She's a boss bitch. She owns that like a bitch, because it's been so, as negative. Oh, she's like a girl, or, she's pussy. There's nothing worse in our world as, that's just the weakest thing. And it's just crap.
In my coaching path, pussy is a word we use all the time, and it equals power and all the things you say. It's like, it is not a negative. It's actually like a celebrated word. And
it should be.
Yeah, and I have teen daughters, so I can use that with them now, and I love that, because it's true. Why do we say that to boys? Like, you play like a girl, or you fight like a girl. It's like, that should be a compliment.
I know.
Right?
It should be.
Yeah.
But the patriarchy doesn't want that.
No.
Tim,
so
patriarchy hater, stands with us.
My question would be, why did they feel so threatened? Why did they feel so threatened back then? Why did they feel so threatened now? Because we know, especially in terms of mainstream religion and a lot that's been said and done is just to get power and to instill fear. So what exactly were they afraid of?
Yes, Christine.
There's our answer.
Yeah.
I love it. So I've had this conversation with men intimately, right? Like, yeah, what is this? The majority of the data that I've collected on this is they're threatened that women don't need them. That, like, women are so capable and so strong and so powerful. Like, oh my gosh, you guys are not going to have a use for us. And instead of upping themselves to give us a presence in our lives where they are valuable and needed, instead, it turns to the anger, the fear, and then they want to squash which you can't, right? I mean, you can't squash this. It's like holding a ball underwater, right? Like we have that energy in the world, and it's going to rise. So you might as well be a part of it rather than try squashing it. But I don't know how to shift that thinking either. And most of the women I know are badass women, and they can and they do most things without men. And any men that are in their lives, it's because they are adding to their life, right? And they're supporting them in some way. And we've really gotten away from that in our society.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when they're too much work, when the men are too much work, we don't need them.
Right.
It rather, like you said, than upping their game and stuff like that. There's an old joke, again, this is turning into, I'm being very blue on this show, but why didn't God destroy men at the invention of vibrators? Who would take out the trash? It's a joke, but just saying that, men are needed. We do need them, but we don't need to parent another baby. We
Exactly.
don't need to lead someone along. We need a partner to stand, like you said, to support us, because the patriarchy has lost. We are no longer at home dependent on men for our money, where we cannot stand up and choose to say we will not be treated this way anymore. Now we're standing up, and now it's time for them to say, so are we.
Absolutely.
And one of my first questions that I ask a woman who is looking for a relationship, and they'll start outlining the things that they're looking for in a man, is, does he support you at the soul level?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Tim's bragging. He does.
Congratulations, Tim.
Kristen's a lucky woman.
And that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Wanting somebody and needing them are two different things.
Two different energies. But to answer your question, from the study that I have done, it really changed when society was built. When men were no longer required to go out and hunt and to do war, they came into the family unit that was run by women and brought that power, that conquer, that all of that energy in to now run the society. Women had run everything in their absence for the millennia. But all of a sudden, they didn't need to go and hunt because their neighbor was, they could exchange. It was a bartering system. They no longer had to leave. So because of the instincts, because of, you can even chalk it up to possibly DNA, they needed that power to control again. Unfortunately, it got out of control. And history proves that. It's, one of the women should have used a broom. No.
Yeah, it's like backwards evolution.
Know your role.
Well, at least we're slowly but surely seeing some changes.
Yeah.
In the right direction.
Well, and history will prove that, right? Because if we become a better society because of this, I mean, today the Andrew Cuomo thing, I was screaming all morning and just irate. And there's a lot going on in social media and reflecting it back to politics. It's not about politics, it's about power. And when that power, especially a negative masculine toxicity, is out there, you're going to get those types of things. You're going to get the assault and the attack. And sadly, possibly even disgustingly, I believe that he doesn't think he did anything wrong. I really do. That doesn't change the fact that he did. It's disgusting. But because of that entitlement of the patriarchy, he does that with everybody. Come on. Well, women have been subjected to this for far too long.
Being as old as I am, I know what things were like in my generation and the generation before me. And it doesn't surprise me that he would think that there's nothing wrong with it, nothing unusual about it. Pretty much that's how we grew up. Boys were taught by their dads, whatever you can get it. Well, girls were being told no matter what they want, don't give it, which, was interesting. But so they would just take it by force. And there were little things. It was like, how did you dress? How are you dancing? your makeup, your hair. It was like, well, she was suggestive.
Always blame the
You
woman.
know, and there was this mindset that men had this need or boys had this need. Women didn't have it. Women just
That's a
were
lie.
supposed to do it to please the man, or because it was their marital obligation, or because they wanted to get pregnant. But you weren't supposed to enjoy it. It was something that was for the men.
A politician tweeted a couple, maybe even a year ago, that said, "I've never known a woman to enjoy sex." Says a lot about you,
It's
dude.
sad.
Well, and I wanted
yourself
a
like
big
that.
part of my journey was reconnecting to my sexuality after severing it. And the statistics of women and girls that have been abused or traumatized is 1 out of 4 right now.
Oh, yeah.
And when we cut off that connection to our womb space, which so many of us do from trauma, from stories, from the way we were raised, it actually cuts off our creative flow because it cuts off the energy to our womb space, which for women, it's the creation, right? Whether you even have a womb or not,
Yeah.
it's your creative space. And so when we sever that connection, we're actually dampening all of that goddess energy, all of that creative energy. I also wanted to point out, I see women as part of this problem too. You know, I have a girl that was friends with my daughter came to me and was telling me how she was assaulted and how her mom told her to shut up about it and didn't want her to report it. And it's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing for your daughter? And I'm like, yeah, we need a rebalancing, right? It's not, this is just all men. I mean, the impact has grown into women too. And this, just be quiet and be a good girl, you know, don't be too loud. And really, how do we bring all of this back to be rebalanced? Like, that's the vision I keep having, is how do we rebalance that?
When you think of how the girls or women are treated, though, when they go to court, it's like they're the ones that are the perpetrator rather than the victim.
Someone said
Absolutely.
that today.
Yeah.
You said that today. My head exploded.
Yeah.
I can imagine a mom saying, just be quiet about it, knowing that her daughter would be put through pure hell if she took the person to court and stuff. So that's the kind of thing that needs to change, I think, before women and girls are going to be comfortable enough to say, this is what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 21, I was locked into a safe with a man. He was a very powerful man in the city. He was well known, very, very wealthy. It was during the time of Anita Hill. And when I kneed him in the groin after he had ripped at my clothes and pawed at me, he begged me not to tell anyone. And I sarcastically said, my middle name's Anita. I felt like I was never going to allow this to happen. This was crap. I got away. I knew I had just really dodged a bullet. There was a safe. I couldn't yell. I couldn't run. His office was literally a giant safe. So when he finally let me out, I ran out. It was at a golf course, of which he owned. And I used the payphone. Really dating how old I am right now. But I immediately called my boss, who was a woman. And I was distraught. You know, you cannot even believe what he did to me. And she laughed. She laughed and said, well, just don't go see him again. And my clothes were torn. I was like, what do you mean? You're just, and she laughed and she just continued laughing. Well, you know, boys will be boys. Just don't go back. And that gutted me as much as the assault did. Because she took away any power I had. She catered to the patriarchy. I mean, and all of those things came flooding back to me today as watching Cuomo said it was her fault. She was damaged. She was all of these things. And to have the women who could be our allies and could stand with us deny that feminine solace or sisterhood is even more damaging, I think. And it perpetuates the problem.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, So what do we do to fix it? What do we do to regain this power without threatening men? And without making them, I mean, I know we're not responsible for men and their insecurities and those types of things, but how can we really harness this power, this goodness, this grace, as well as the gall, and do something with this, really embody her? And I mean, how do we change this patriarchal bullshit?
For me, it's
an example.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, I was just going to say, by being an example,
Okay.
This is who I am. And by continuing to inform and educate, and because there are more and more men that are starting to understand and be open to it, but information about it is not that widespread, at least in my circles.
Yeah, mine neither.
And so making that information available and doing things like you're doing with this program is a good start.
That's why I wanted to do it, because I mean, I know that when I discovered her, no one I knew had ever heard of her. No one.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, okay, let's go ahead and talk about this. I think that if you put the information out there, you give people the option to say, no, I don't want to believe in that. I do believe in that. Or let me try and use this to my benefit. So knowledge is power, whether you believe it or not. And that's why I do these shows.
And
Daphne,
doing a show like this, can have a ripple effect, because whoever's watching it now, if they share it with their friends and their friends share it with their friends, the information gets more and more put out there.
Daphne.
Yeah, I really like the idea of creating an invitation for men to rise up, to stand up and be all that they can be. And like, what man doesn't want to be all they can be, right? Like, I mean, that seems so fitting to me. And it might just be a matter of how. And yeah, I see men that are doing this, and men that are having groups and are having these discussions, and to lessen the anger, right? And to really create like a safe space to be able to have that dialogue. Mm-hmm. And same with women too, right? I mean, the women like your boss, Sherry, that laughed at you, like creating an invitation for how can we do better? Like, what if this was your daughter, right? Yeah. Right? Like, how do we shift this? And why do we think it's okay? And I think it's really having hard conversations. Like, why do you think that's okay? Why do you think it's okay to laugh at that? Because I think it's so ingrained in people that they don't even realize their reactions, because they're just automatic, right? But really stopping people and saying, yeah, why would you think that was funny or okay? And is this what you want for all of the future? And thankfully, it's getting more acceptable to come forward, even though women still are being treated so shitty in the process. It's happening more and more, and it's getting momentum. And I think there is a huge movement of people that are like, this is not okay, right? This is not okay. Just because politicians have always done this, it's not okay to continue. Just because bosses have always done this, it's not okay to continue. And I think it's going to take some time too.
I love that we're not silenced anymore.
Absolutely.
Silence perpetuates it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things in our past that have been acceptable in that time and space, but hopefully we're continuing to evolve. And at some point, more and more people will say, this is not okay anymore. Mm-hmm. We're better than that.
Hopefully.
And we see people write, we're better than that. And it's like, well, apparently not. Because if we were, this wouldn't still be going on, Right. So I might be better than that. You might be better than that. But collectively, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, to have Cuomo on the news today blaming the victims, blaming his victims, his survivors.
That was so disappointing.
It was, she was abused before. That's why she's saying I mean, it was so disgusting. Rather
than just saying,
I had no idea.
Mistake or mistakes. Yeah. I'm a different person now. and and stuff. But yeah, that was very disappointing.
I mean, he
And
could have said,
perhaps
"I
it's
learned."
exactly what people need to get fired up and pissed off enough, though.
Yeah,
Right?
true.
Like it's showing us such a contrast. When you see something like that and you get that feeling inside, like that is so wrong, like maybe that's what we need to have right now, is like really talking about the fire, right? Really flaming the fire and getting it really big, so big that enough people say no more.
In trying to heal from a life of assaults, today I went through a process, and it was when one of the people at the press conference was listing what he had actually done. I felt it. I felt the harassment. I remembered all of the times in my professional career that had happened to me, and I remembered the lack of support. But I also was able to take that pain today, as opposed to feeling like a victim, like I had for so many years. Why did they do this to me? Why are they so bad? I said, now I have the power. I know how to stop them. Before, I didn't know how to stop them. Before, my only resource was to go to my boss and say, help. I don't need that anymore. So I think in taking our power back, we'll stop some of this stuff too, because of our silence, because we didn't know any better. A man of power, there was nothing more to me than that. And some people might find that shocking because I'm such a strong woman and all that stuff. But it is very intimidating to anybody for a person of power, especially to use your sexuality as a point of praise, of promise, or of penalty. It's used all the time in the patriarchy. Give me one more P word.
Pussy.
Pussy! Pussy power! So yeah, I think that will be hopefully a good change. And as Tim says, men are calling out their peers, and that'll bring change too. Silence, I think what we've seen in the last couple of years, silence, it will only perpetuate problems. Time to rise up.
Well, and going back to religion and the Bible for just a minute, the one of the questions that I like to ask after we've talked about the role of some of the women in the Bible and the stories in that is, when you think of God as feminine, does it make God less powerful or more powerful? And again, there's those different attributes that we have, tend to assign. But as you really look at those characters in the Bible, you can see women might have strength in a different way than the man does, depending on what she's doing. But you can still see the strength that's there. Like with Naomi and Ruth, that took strength to just up and leave and stuff like that. So I think there are, if a lot of the different denominations, Christians especially, because they still seem to have a pretty good handle on controlling women. You see stuff from, evangelical women especially, all the time, that will say, it is in the Bible. My husband is the head of the household. I have to do whatever he says. Our children have to do whatever he says. But if they could just, if they were just offered some kind of workshops or material where they could read and, and find a way to associate and say, yeah, this is me too. This isn't just, other people, and this is good, and see that that's what's actually meant to be. That it's all, again, just somebody that interpreted from their lens, and it caught on because you're giving men power, they're going to take the power.
I have really a family member that was, sorry, Sherry, go ahead.
Sorry, Daphne, go ahead.
I have a family member who was Mormon, and what came to mind when you were talking, Michelle, was Lord and Master of the home.
Yeah.
And that's what the Mormon indoctrination is. And they're not allowed to do research or Google or, I mean, and he ended up leaving the Mormon church when he did do the research. And he was like, oh, wow. Right. But yeah, how do you get that information to people where the information is supposed to be restricted to keep them suppressed?
For thousands of years, no less.
Right.
I mean, this isn't something that's new. But I love that question of what changes if God's a woman, because I think it would be so revealing in the answer, right? I mean, if there is weakness, if you do view women as weak, if you do, oh my God, that would be horrible. Why? I think that's a fabulous question that I'm actually going to post all over my social media to find out what people would say, because it really does answer a question that that's not thought of often. And I'm imagining that Terry. Hi, Terry.
When you're reading the Bible, there are so many examples of ways that God shows up as mother. There's in Hosea, there's a quote, when Israel was a child, I loved him. I was to them like those who lift infants to their cheeks. I bent down and fed them. If that doesn't sound like a mother or a woman, what does? And there's just so many examples like that if you really read. But unfortunately, most of what people do know of the Bible is what their preacher is telling them on Sunday mornings. And they're picking and choosing the things that continue to support the patriarchy, the control, and the fear.
When I was a kid, the pastor asked the congregation one day, men, where would we be without our wives? And someone in the audience said, in the Garden of Eden. Everybody roared. It's the funniest thing ever. But when you go back to the dawn of time as women being the fall of everything, you're not gonna get anywhere. So there's a lot of education, and I think it starts with, let's start with the story of Adam and Eve, and let's dissect that to, why there was a snake present, why there was an apple present, why all of these things were present in this story.
What do those things all represent?
Exactly. And without that knowledge, it does lend us to believe that women are the fall of humanity. And there's no other way around that with that story. So, I mean, we need to, as sad as it is, we need to go back to the dawn of time and fix this indoctrination. Because we love you too, Terry. Terry's all over the comments. So yes, and that's where we can, I think, really. So we've got to start from ashes to ashes and dust to dust, and break this. Fuck the patriarchy. And I think that's going to have it at the top of the hour as the final words of this show on The Goddess. I want to thank my panel. It's been another amazing conversation. Daphne, do you have any final words, and where can everybody find you?
No, this was just wonderful. Thank you. And obviously, this is such a big conversation. In addition to being a warrior goddess facilitator, I do one-on-one coaching, and I also am a firewalk instructor, and I have a spiritual center at my home in the northern suburb of Chicago. You can find me on Facebook as Daphne Paris, invokethegoddess.com, also on Facebook, and transfiremation.com is the firewalking, and the Sanctuary Riverwoods is my space at my home. Thank you.
I've never wanted to do firewalking, but I'll do it with you. I think that
Beautiful.
would be awesome. Michelle, what are your final words for this show, and where can everybody find you?
Well, I don't have any final words, because it's like we just barely scratched the surface of, all the information and everything that's out there. But I encourage you, anybody that's watching or will see it later, that if this is a topic that interests you, there are a lot of resources on the web that you can go to and get more information. One of them, especially about Ashera and the background, which kind of gives you a little bit more idea of how she developed over thousands of years. If you go to the Jewish Woman's Archive, you can pull up information about her specifically. Other than that, if you want to connect with me, you can find me by my name or through my ministry site, which I am retired, but still try to stay active. And there are different things that I'm available for, including spiritual counseling, prayer work, doing the rhythm circles, drum circles, as Sherry mentioned, and more. So you can connect with me on either of those places on Facebook. And thank you, Sherry.
Thank you for coming.
Here.
I loved this conversation. It's never long enough. It's never long enough. But that's why we continue in the VIP. To have some one-on-one conversations and for other people to ask questions. So I will see you on the other side. Thank you so much, ladies. You are truly the goddess in incarnate. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Bye-bye. I think Daphne's freezed up again. Oh, I just love this show, and the conversations I get to have are just so enlightening and lifting, and they're just awesome. If you want to join us backstage, go to sherrypalace.com and hit the support tab. Let me try and pull that for you. And then you'd be able to get into our VIP after show and talk one-on-one, come on camera with the panel and ask all of those questions. Next week's chat will be on grace, and another topic that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially me. I'm still learning grace as an everyday practice and trying to master that, which I don't know that I ever will, but I hope to. I want to thank you all again for coming and for the support, and I will see you next week. With love, guys. See you soon. Mwah.